Hey friends, I'm going to talk to you today about canning salmon. And the reason we're going to do that is whether it's salmon season or not, or tuna season, or any kind of season, it doesn't matter if you can during that season or if you freeze it and can it later. That's the beautiful thing about canning, is that not always does it have to be done immediately. There's a lot of things that you can do once you've thawed something that's been frozen. Now this salmon, our son caught, and it is a beautiful salmon. He fishes. He's an amazing fisherman, but he hates to eat fish. He won't eat fish, he won't eat crab, he won't eat anything that comes out of the water. So guess who gets the goodies? That's right. So I'm going to can this salmon, and it can be canned from a frozen state, which is nice, but I'm going to show you, because you know I got to do things by the book, because I'm a safety girl. I'm going to be using, one of my favorites, because it's free, the Complete Guide to Home Canning. Nobody who wants to can, there's nobody that should be without this book, because it's free. You can download it. And on section 5, page 10, it talks about fish in pint jars. There is a section that talks about fish in quart jars, but quite frankly, that's a huge amount of fish. So, and it's really unusual to do that. Most people do it in pint or half pint jars. And what I'm going to be using today is, they're called squatty pints. I love them. They're great for fish. But anyway, fish is pressure canned only. I don't care who tells you that they boil water can tuna for like 8 hours. I don't care. I don't care if they tell you they can it in the oven. I don't care. It is a pressure canned item, and it has to be done in a pressure canner. Because remember, pressure canners are made for canning, cookers are made for cooking. You can cook in a canner, but you can't can in a cooker. So anyway, for this recipe, you can use bluefish, mackerel, salmon, steelhead, trout, and other fatty fish except tuna. This one is, the reason is because there's a little bit of preparation. It's a little bit different. So if you happen to be canning and you notice in your canned item that there will be, it even has a little note here that says glass-like crystals of struvite, which is actually magnesium ammonium phosphate, will sometimes form in the canned salmon. No worries, it's fine. It should go away when the salmon is heated. Like if you're going to make salmon patties, it'll go away. If not, it's fine. It won't hurt you. So don't worry about that. But anyway, this is actually a really simple process. So what I've got is, I'll show you. I've got my pressure canner here. I've got jars in there, and they're hot. And this is what I'm talking about, the squatty pint. See, it's a pint, but it's not tall and thin. It's kind of squatty. I've got 10 of those. I don't think I'm going to use that many, but better safe than sorry. So I've got those all in my pressure canner with about 3 inches of water on the bottom. And mine is a weighted gauge, but it is also a dial gauge because I had it converted. So I've got kind of the beauty of both of those. But then what we're going to do is, I'm also going to do some jelly here in a little bit. Boy, my kitchen looks like a mess in videos. It's not that bad in real life, because I know what everything is, I guess, probably. But anyway, so I'm gonna turn the camera down now so that you can watch the process. I only did this because I realized I never show myself in my canning videos, and I wanted to start doing that. Okay, so here's my salmon. It is all ready to go. A couple things with salmon is, I like to wear gloves because it's fish. But also, you can eliminate some of the odor of canning food or canning fish in your kitchen by simply adding some vinegar to the water in the canner. And also, I didn't have clear vinegar, so I'm just using cider vinegar, and that's fine. The vinegar is just what cuts the slime. So if you're washing fish too, and it's got that slime to it, if you add a little bit of vinegar to your wash water, it will also cut the slime, which is nice. I can't get this darn thing on. There. So essentially what we do is we take a jar, cut pieces off, and if you have the, God, I'm really struggling with this glove. Okay. If you have skin on it, you kind of want to, they say it looks nicer if you can it with the skin side out, because it just kind of looks cool, but it's harder to clean the jar because the skin will attach to the jar. Oh man, I can't believe this glove. I'll just use one. Anyway, so the skin will attach to the outside of the jar. So I have, this fish has a beautiful skin on the outside. Look at that. It's really a pretty color. A lot of A lot of dark and light in there. Anyway, so I'm going to can it with the skin on the outside. And all you do is you cut pieces. If you're doing pint jars, you can cut pieces the length of the jar and roll it and put it in the jar. And that works out great. And then you can cut off other little pieces to kind of fill in. So that's handy. So then once you have your jar full, you want to take a paper towel with a little bit of vinegar on it. That's my cider vinegar. Wipe the rim because it will cut that fish oil off of there. And then you're going to put your lids on and process. So let me do one of them for you. We'll get you going, and then I'll come back and do the rest of them. So hold on. So I've got my jar. Let me see. Let me get you where you can see. I don't want to touch my camera with my fishy glove. Hold on. Tilt down. There we go. That's probably pretty good. There you go. I have to wipe that off. Ugh. Oh, sorry. Man. All right, there we go. So now what I'm going to do is take a knife. Oh, I don't want to use my hand. Although my hand's washed, I am going to get that glove. I need to use 2 gloves. One glove makes me crazy. I want to touch everything with 2 hands. But I did have my hands well washed. And another note, you don't have to sterilize these jars, because if they're going to be a pressure canned item, they don't need pre-sterilized. You just need to make sure they're washed and clean. And these are. So I've got so many jars. It's incredible. Okay, so I like to take the jar and just kind of measure out where I think I'm going to cut. And I think it's going to be about right there. And they say you want about an inch head space. So you want the whole neck of the jar open. I think this might be too much. Okay. Now I'm going to roll. Yeah, it's not going to roll very nicely. I'll do this one. No, I don't want to do that with the skin side out. So what I'm going to do is cut the thickest part in the middle. Get that out of the way. I should have one of those little speed up cameras. I do on my little GoPro. Now, there we go. So this way I can take the thick and the thin and put it opposite of this thick and thin, and then kind of roll it into the jar. There's that one. And there's that one. Perfect. See there? Now, if you don't want this end open, you could cut little bits right here off the tail. A lot of people do that to fill in those little bits and just make a prettier jar. I got these Cuisinart knives at Costco, and I love them. They're fantastic. Oh, and you don't have to debone it either, because the pressure canning process actually will soften the bones, and they're a good source of calcium anyway. So I'm going to stick this little bit down there. There. I'm going to stick this one on the other side. And you do not have to add any liquid. You can add a teaspoon of salt per pint if you want. I don't. I don't see any point in it, because I usually will season the fish after I take it out, so I don't need to put salt in it. And you know, we kind of try to cut down on salt. Oh boy, get in there. There we go. There we go. That slipped in there just right. And if there's any scales, they will also soften. So that's kind of neat looking. There we go. Make that flat. And now I'm going to take my paper towel with my vinegar, and I'm going to wipe the heck out of that jar top. If vinegar gets inside, drips down in there, that's fine. Not the end of the world. It's actually a really easy process. I think the hardest part is either catching the fish or getting someone who has fish to give it to you. So that's probably the hardest part of the whole thing. Now I'm going to put a lid on there. And then we're going to put the ring on. Now that, just like any other jar, you want to do fingertip tight, but I'm going to use my cool little canning tool from Ball. I love this thing because I've never had a seal fail that I've used it on. All right, that's it. There it is. That's what I'm going to do, and I will put that in the canner. And then once I get those all in there, I will let you know what we're doing from that point. If you've never been exposed to pressure canning, this way I can explain to you what the canner is doing. So I'll be back with you shortly. Okay, I've got everything jarred up, and I had ended up with 9.5 pints. I did this little half pint right here. But I wanted to show you a couple things about a pressure canner. First of all, when you use one of these, if you're not familiar, you need to always make sure that you have liquid in the water in the bottom. So on this one, I've got about 3 inches of water, and you see how the water, after I get the jars in, the water comes over the top? That's fine. No worries. It's fine. It can do that. And then if you have more than will fit there, and you can see I've got 7 pints, squatty pints, you can put a trivet across the top. And yes, you can double stack things in a pressure canner. So there you go. The reason you put the trivet in there is because you don't want one jar, let me show you, sitting on top of another jar, because it could push the rim down. And this kind of keeps it up off of there so that they won't push down on the top of the other jar, so that it has room to process and seal correctly. So this is a super, super old canner, but it's a fantastic canner. And then what we're going to do is, if we look at the recipe here, which I just got water on, but you are going to put the fish in half pint or 12-ounce jars, all get to be processed at the same amount of time. And salmon, whether you got a pressure canner or a weighted gauge or a dial gauge, they process for 100 minutes. Now, the difference is I'm at sea level, so my pressure or dial is right here at 0 to 1,000 feet. And yes, the pressure canner, the pressure and the weighted gauge and the dial gauge are different, because the dial gauge can go up by 1 pound increments. The weighted gauge can only go up in 5 pound increments. So you can see it goes 10 or 15 pounds if you're above 1,000 feet. If you're below 1,000 feet, it's 10 pounds. Whereas if you're using a pressure gauge, it can go from 11 to 2,000 to 4,000 feet is 12 pounds of pressure. 4,001 to 6,000 feet is 13 pounds of pressure. 6,001 to 8,000 feet is 14 pounds of pressure, because a dial gauge will go up by 1 pound increments. So either way, it's going to be processed for 100 minutes. That's an hour and 40 minutes. And now what's going to happen is I'm going to put my lid on, and I'm going to see if I can line this up with you guys. In one hand, hold on, I'll be right back. I got to put that on right. Okay, there, I've got it on there, but you can see under the lids on these old guys, there's going to be one little section right there that is a longer hole than that, and there's a matching kind of divot on the top. So I'm going to put that on. Then what you do is you push it, you put it up to high pressure, and you bring it to a venting process, which is where, I'm going to turn it to high. It builds up steam inside, and this is called a pitcock, and through there comes steam as it builds up, and that's going to start steam as it comes out of there. It's forcing the air between the jars up through the canner and out this little stem, and it'll start venting. Once you see a good column of steam, doesn't have to be like overpowering, but just a little good column of steam, you're going to start the process of timing this for 10 minutes. This needs to vent for 10 minutes. Then you're going to put your weight on. Now, if you've got a 15-pound weight, it will you'll be using this, but you're going to use either the weight or the gauge. But I can show you, as soon as the weight starts jiggling, this is a 10-pound weight, we'll be right at 11 pounds on the gauge. And you should have your gauge checked every year. You can do that at your extension office. Some hardware stores will do it. Manufacturer will double check it, but then it still needs to go out in the mail, so it still gets banged around. But anyway, so this will come up. This is a little... what happens is, if this builds up too much pressure, this thing will pop out and release the pressure. So the old stories of, canners exploding, really, they don't do that because they've got this thing. But anyway, once this goes for 10 minutes, I'll put the weight on, and then once it comes to pressure, you start the process of timing 100 minutes. So this is a long process, but it's well worth it in the end. So once this starts venting, I'll come back and show you how that's going. Okay, you guys, you can see this is coming up, and you can see how it's kind of sputters there. It just sputtered. That's the air getting forced out from between the jars in there. So every once in a while, you'll just like get a little clear spot that's not steam, and that's just getting the air out of there. So I'm going to set a timer now. That's a good column of steam. I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes. Alexa, set a timer for 10 minutes. Sorry, I wanted to get it done before that happened really quick. Anyway, so I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes, and then I'll come back and we'll put the weight on, and then we'll watch the pressure go up. But I do want to say, see how that steam goes up? And you want to make sure that you don't have your microwave door in an area that can get that steam, because I'll tell you what, I actually had to replace a microwave because I melted the front of it with a pressure canner going through the venting process. So I'll be back to you shortly. Here's just a little progress. That's been going about 3 minutes, and you can see the force that is happening there, and that's a good thing. It's building up the pressure that needs to be in that canner to safely process the canned salmon or anything that you pressure can. That is what, see here it sputter? It's really forcing the air out from all around those jars and stuff, but that is really going strong, and that's fine. Don't worry about it when it's doing that. It's supposed to. Okay guys, the timer is off, so now I'm going to put the little weighted gauge on there. Oh, it's suddenly so much quieter. And you can see it was already pressure building up in there. And you can see this little doodad has popped out. I forgot the name of that. I'll figure it out and I'll tell you. Anyway, it's popped up, so you know that that's sealed under there. The weighted gauge is on, and this already had built up 5 pounds of pressure just from releasing all that steam. So here shortly, I wonder how long it'll take. Maybe I'll bring you back, because it might take, once it gets up here, it'll take a little bit. I'm going to turn it down a little bit. And what happens, once you get to pressure, you can turn your heat down because there's so much pressure in here, and you don't want to keep it higher. It's just going to keep getting higher and higher, and the rocker's just going to go crazy. So you want to turn it down to where you keep it right at the right rocker. This when it rocks will go like ch-ch-ch-ch-ch. That's it. Some of them will wait a second, and they'll go ch-ch, and then they wait, and then they go ch-ch. And if you understand why that works, it's not so scary. What happens is this has one ring that it's like a little plug that sticks on there, and then there's these additional discs. Each disc adds 5 pounds of pressure. So once it builds up to 10 pounds of pressure, it will actually be enough, and you saw all that steam come out, to lift this. So it'll do that. It'll let some of the steam out. So this is so accurate, because as soon as it builds up to 10 pounds of pressure, it'll push this up enough to release steam so it comes back down. So it'll always stay there. Oh, see, let me see if I can stop it. So here it goes. See how it's starting to do? And looky there. We're right at 11 pounds on my dial. So now, if this starts getting up here and that starts going too much, like this just starts rocking like crazy and that gets higher, I'm going to lower my temperature. And I've done this enough that I know with this canner, usually I keep the temperature at about 7 on my dial, and that'll keep me right at 11 pounds in this rocking. So as you use your pressure canner, you'll get used to where you have to set each canner. Like I've got 4 canners, and I know exactly each one of them where I need to set it. It's weird that they each have a different setting to keep them on track. But see how this is going? And this is just a little bit, it's a little bit high right now, but it'll come back down to 11 pounds, and we'll be fine. So now that we've come to pressure, I'm going to set a timer for 100 minutes. That's an hour and 40 minutes. And when that's done, we'll come back and I'll tell you what we'll do then. Another quick tip. I just want to let you know I set a timer for 100 minutes, which is an hour and 40 minutes. But what I do is I'll also write what time it will be when that happens, in case I did get distracted and think, oh my gosh, if I don't officially have a timer set, you can just write down what time it will be in an hour and 40 minutes. So obviously, right now, it is 4:03, because in an hour it'll be 5, and 40 minutes will be 43. So I write that down so that I can always just keep track. So that's just a tip. Ask me how I know to do that, because I've lost track of time before and had to completely start processing something over before. So that's just a tip. Okay, guys, the timer went off. It's 5:43. See, I wrote that down right there, which was good because my Wi-Fi went out, and I usually use Alexa to set the timers, and so she went off for a little bit, so it worried me. But I'm glad I wrote that time down. So what I've done, because the time is done, I turned the power or the heat off. You could move this off of the burner, but it's really heavy, and I don't want to lift it, so I'm just going to let it sit there. But what we need to do is let it come all the way to 0, no pressure at all. And then when that happens, we'll take this off and we'll let that sit there for 10 minutes before we take the lid off. And you know, when you take the lid off, you want to lift it away from you so that rush of steam or hot air doesn't come up in your face. So we'll do that, and then I'll take the jars out, and you will get to see the beautiful salmon that I will have to eat whenever I want. Okay, you can see this is not moving anymore, and no steam comes out when you move it, and the dial gauge is at 0. If you use a dial gauge, that's what you're looking for. If you use a weighted gauge, this is what you're looking for, but I got both of them. So I'm going to take this off. See, no steam comes out. I'm going to let that sit for 10 minutes. Okay, so it's set for 10 minutes after the pressure went to 0, and I removed the weight, and then I opened it away from me, so that hot air doesn't come up in my face. And you can see that salmon. Look at that. It's still boiling inside. That is going to be some really yummy salmon. And I just want to say, you know, these little weird things like these spots on top and stuff, that's fine. A little bit of that fish oil will get out in the water. It'll settle on there. And as the water level goes down, it just kind of congeals on there. But you can wash that off. It'll be fine. But now what will I do with this? Well, whenever I want to, I will have salmon patties, or instead of tuna noodle casserole, you can make salmon noodle casserole. You can use it for sandwich filler like you would tuna. Anything you could use tuna for, you can do this. And when you take it out of the jar, it's really easy just to slide the skin off. Whole lot easier to slide the skin off after it's been canned than try to get off the skin in order to can it. So anyway, there it is, canned salmon. Thanks for watching.